The rain fell hard on the abandoned spaceport, tapping against the rusted metal roofs like 1,000 tiny drums. Jacob Reeves tightened the hood of his worn jacket and kept walking, his boots splashing through shallow puddles that reflected the flickering lights overhead. He had been told to meet someone here, someone not human, and, though he had been in the Terran Navy for years, he'd never once stood face to face with one of them. The storm smelled like metal and burned ozone. Ships that had once carried goods across half the galaxy now sat broken, stripped for parts, their hulls scarred with old battle damage. This was the kind of place you came to if you wanted to disappear, if you were about to do something you shouldn't. Jacob's hand stayed near the inside pocket of his jacket. Not for a weapon, but for the small, rectangular object wrapped in cloth. It wasn't a data drive. It wasn't alien tech. It was older than either. A simple cassette tape. He had found it weeks earlier, buried inside a storage locker back on Earth. On the label, written in fading ink, were the words, "Songs for the Road." He had played it on an old cassette deck in his quarters and been hit with a wave of nostalgia. The voices, the guitars, the warmth, it was like a piece of home captured in a box. And tonight, for reasons he couldn't fully explain, he was here to give it away. He saw her before she saw him. A tall, slim figure leaning against a cargo crate, her skin faintly glowing in the rain, the light shifting between pale silver and faint blue. She wore a hood too, but the wind blew it back for a moment, revealing sharp alien features, eyes too bright, pupils shaped like narrow diamonds. She wasn't armed, at least not visibly, but there was a certain stillness in her stance, the kind soldiers had. "Reeves?" She called, her voice like a chime under the rain. He stopped a few meters away. "That's me. You're Kayla." Her lips curved slightly. "You have it." Jacob took out the cloth-wrapped cassette. "I do. But before I hand it over, I need to know, why do you want it?" Kayla stepped closer, her gaze fixed on the tape as if it were alive. "Because on my world, music like this does not exist. We hear about it in stories. Earth's raw sound. They say it changes people. I need to know if that is true." He raised an eyebrow. "You crossed into Terran territory for a mixtape? You know how dangerous that is for someone from your side?" She met his eyes without blinking. "Some things are worth the risk." Jacob thought about the war, about all the rules that said humans and her kind weren't supposed to trade anything, let alone something cultural. If his superiors found out, he'd lose his post, maybe even his freedom. But something in her expressions, something almost human, kept him from walking away. "You'll need a cassette player," he said finally. "I have one," she said, almost smiling. "An old Terran soldier gave it to me once. He didn't survive the war." Jacob handed the tape over. Her fingers brushed his, cold but steady. And for a moment, standing there in the rain, he felt the weight of what he'd just done. This wasn't just passing along an old relic, was breaking a silent wall between two worlds before either of them could say more. A deep hum filled the air. Light swept across the wet ground from above. Kella's head snapped up, her pupils narrowing sharply. "Patrol ship," she said, her voice suddenly tight. "They must have tracked me." Jacob cursed under his breath. "We've got to move." Now, they ran between rows of derelict ships, the patrol searchlight slicing through the rain behind them. Kayla moved fast, silent as a shadow, but Jacob's boots splashed loudly in the puddles. The hum grew louder, closer. "Why are they chasing you over a cassette?" He shouted. "It's not just the tape," she called back. "It's what's on it. Those songs, they're banned on my world. The lyrics speak of freedom. Our leaders fear that." Jacob's mind raced. If her people banned something as harmless as a love song, then giving her that tape wasn't just dangerous, it was political. They ducked under a collapsed hangar door and pressed against the wall, breathing hard. The patrol ship slowed outside, its beam crawling over the metal wreckage. Kayla clutched the tape to her chest. "They find me, they'll destroy this. And you," Jacob added grimly. Her eyes flicked to him. "You didn't have to help." "Me? Why did you?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "Because once, someone gave me music when I needed it most. Changed everything." The patrol ship moved on, its lights fading into the storm. Kayla let out a slow breath, but she didn't relax. "They'll be back. We have to leave the port." Jacob knew she was right. He also knew he couldn't just let her walk away with that tape, not because he wanted it back, but because now he was part of whatever this was. And if she got caught, his name would be the next one on the report. "Where's your ship?" he asked. "Hidden in the scrapyard's north sector," she replied. "But it's a long run in the open." Jacob nodded. "Then we don't run. We make them look somewhere else." He glanced around the hangar, spotting an old cargo loader. With a few quick steps, he climbed inside, wires sparking as he tried the controls. Kayla frowned, but didn't stop him. The loader roared to life, its engine echoing across the port. Lights flared. Jacob drove it hard toward the far end of the yard, away from Kayla's route. The patrol ship's searchlight swung back immediately. Chasing the noise, Kayla slipped into the shadows, moving toward the north sector. Jacob kept the loader swerving until he saw her vanish behind a row of rusted freighters. Only then did. He'd jump out and dive into cover as the patrol ship descended, scanning the empty loader. For a tense minute, they searched the area. Then, frustrated, they pulled away. Jacob made his way toward the north sector, rain running down his face. When he found Kayla again, she was already at her sheep asleep. Silvercraft half buried under scrap metal. "You're either brave or foolish," she said quietly as the hatch opened. "Both," Jacob replied. She paused at the ramp, looking back at him. "Come with me. Hear it with me." The first time, Jacob stared at the open hatch. If he stepped inside, there was no going back. He'd be crossing into enemy space, risking everything. But in the rain, the distant sound of music still in his memory, he knew his answer. He stepped onto the ramp, and somewhere deep inside the ship, Kayla slid the cassette into an ancient player, pressing play. The first notes drifted through the air, warm, human, defiant. Jacob didn't know it yet, but that sound was about to change more than just two lives. It was about to start something neither of their worlds could stop. The inside of Kayla's ship was warmer than Jacob expected, a soft hum filling the air as if the walls themselves breathed. The interior wasn't like any Terran vessel he had seen. Smooth curves instead of sharp angles, glowing veins of light running along the panels, and seats shaped to fit a body not entirely human. The air smelled faintly of rain and something sweet, like crushed flowers. Kayla walked ahead, her bare feet making no sound on the metallic floor. She carried the cassette as if it were the most fragile object in the galaxy. When she reached a small room at the center of the ship, she stopped. "This is the listening chamber," she said. "It was built for communication experiments, but I have changed its purpose." Jacob stepped inside. The room was circular, with walls covered in thin silver threads like spider silk. In the center sat a strange-looking player, a mix of old Terran tech and alien craftsmanship. It had the rectangular cassette slot, but its body pulsed with faint blue light. "Sit," she said, motioning to a low seat across from hers. Jacob sat, unsure if he felt more like a guest or a prisoner. Kayla took a breath, slid the cassette into the slot, and pressed play. The room changed instantly. The first gentle notes of guitar drifted out, warm and human, filling the space in a way no hologram or data stream could. The sound was imperfect, slightly hissed, a little uneven, but that made it real. Jacob watched her face as she listened. Her eyes widened at the first rise of the melody. She tilted her head as if trying to catch every vibration in the air. When the singer's voice joined deep raw, full of longing, Kella's lips parted in shock. "This," she whispered, "this is alive." Jacob smiled faintly. "It's called music." She shook her head. "No, we have sound. We have instruments. But this is a confession. A truth spoken without fear. We do not have this where I come from." The song swelled, the voice singing of open roads, of freedom, of leaving behind everything you knew just to find yourself. Jacob had heard it dozens of times before, but in this strange chamber, with Kayla's glowing eyes fixed on nothing and everything, it felt new again. When the first song ended, Kayla didn't speak. She simply pressed the button, letting the second track begin. This one was faster, full of rhythm and laughter in the singer's tone. Kayla leaned forward, her hands clasped, as if holding on to the beat itself. By the time the third song faded, she was breathing harder, her skin's glow. Shifting colors, silver, blue, then faint gold. Jacob frowned. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "On my world, emotions are regulated. We are taught not to let them take control. But this music hit bypasses all of that. It goes straight to the heart." "That's the point," Jacob said quietly. Kayla stood, pacing slowly around the room. "If my people heard this, it would change everything. It would break the chains they don't even know are there." He leaned back in his seat. "Which is why your leaders banned it." She stopped pacing and looked at him sharply. "If I bring this home, they will try to destroy it. They may try to destroy me. Then why risk it?" Her voice was steady. When she replied, "'Cause I would rather be destroyed than live without knowing this feeling again." Before Jacob could answer, the ship's lights dimmed and a sharp tone echoed through the chamber. Kella's expression hardened. "Pursuit signal," she said. "The patrol has locked onto our location." Jacob stood. "How?" "We covered your tracks. They must have traced your biosignature. You are Terran military. That makes you valuable." To them, he swore under his breath. "So now they want me, too." Kayla moved quickly, grabbing a set of thin metallic bands from a wall compartment. She tossed one to him. "Put this around your wrist. What is it? Disruptor? It will hide your life signs from their scanners temporarily." Jacob slipped it on. The band tightened automatically, sending a brief, cold shiver up his arm. Kaela sprinted to the cockpit, and Jacob followed. The view ahead showed the scrapyard melting away beneath them as the ship lifted into the storm-filled sky. In the distance, two dark shapes appeared, sleek interceptors. "Closing fast, they'll try to disable us, not destroy us," Kayla said. "They want prisoners." "Then let's make sure they get nothing," Jacob replied. Kella's hands moved across alien controls, the ship's engines flaring with a sound like a giant heartbeat. They shot upward, weaving through the narrow gaps between derelict cargo haulers and rusted warships. The interceptors followed, their weapons lighting up the dark clouds. Jacob grabbed the co-pilot's controls instinctively, though he had no idea how her ship worked. "Tell me what to do. Hold that lever when I say, and don't let go until we're clear." A bright beam sliced past the cockpit, missing them by meters. Jacob gritted his teeth. Any time now would be good. Now he pulled the lever. The ship lurched violently, and suddenly the stars stretched, the clouds blurring into streaks of light. When the distortion faded, they were surrounded by deep black space. No storm, no scrapyard, no interceptors. Kayla exhaled slowly. "We are in the drift corridor. They cannot track us here." Jacob leaned back, still gripping the lever. "You could have warned me about the stomach drop effect." Her lips twitched. In a faint smile, consider it part of the experience. For a moment, the silence in the cockpit was almost peaceful. Then Kayla reached into her pocket and took out the cassette again. She turned it over in her hands. "There are more songs on this," she said, "but I think I need to hear them slowly. Let them sink in." Jacob nodded. "It's not meant to be rushed." She looked at him for a long moment. "Will you stay? With me? Until I decide what to do with it." He hesitated. "Kayla, if I go with you, there's no going back. The Navy will brand me a deserter. The patrols will treat me as a traitor." Her gaze didn't waver. "And if you stay, they will. Hunt you anyway. At least with me, you will have purpose." Jacob stared at her, at the strange glow of her skin, at the way she held that old piece of Terran history, like it was the most precious thing in the galaxy. He thought of the first time he heard those songs, years ago, alone in a cramped bunk. Far from Earth, he thought of the way they had made him feel like he still belonged somewhere, and he realized that maybe she was right. "All right," he said finally. "I'm in." Kella's eyes brightened, not just with the soft glow of her species, but with something warmer then. From somewhere deep in the ship, the player clicked. And the next song began. Neither of them knew it yet, but the voice is in. That song would light a fire that could spread across the worlds if they survived long enough to carry it there. The drift corridor was quiet, almost too quiet. Outside the cockpit windows, space was a deep, endless black, broken only by faint streaks of light that shimmered and vanished. Jacob had never flown through a corridor like this before. In the Navy, these routes were rarely used. They were unstable, unpredictable, and could strand a ship between systems if something went wrong. Kayla seemed perfectly at ease, her hands resting on the controls while the ship hummed softly. But Jacob's mind wouldn't settle. The last song they'd heard in the listening chamber had stuck with him. It wasn't just the melody, it was the words. "Kayla," he said quietly, "those lyrics, were they about a war?" She glanced at him, one brow rising. "You noticed? A day?" Spoke of walls falling, of voices rising, of no ruler strong enough to silence the people. That wasn't just some random Earth song. That's a protest anthem. Her eyes returned to the controls, but her jaw tightened. "On my world, songs like that are dangerous. We have no free gatherings, no speeches without approval. The idea that people could resist openly terrifies those in power." Jacob leaned back. "Then this tape isn't just music. It's a weapon." Kayla looked at him sharply. "It is a seed, and a seed can grow into something unstoppable." They sat in silence for a moment. The hum of the ship seemed louder now, like the heartbeat of something alive and waiting. Finally, Jacob asked the question that had been pressing in since the port. "Why you? Why risk your life for this when you could just keep your head down like everyone else?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Because I once heard a fragment of an old Earth song just a few seconds broadcast by mistake on an unshielded channel. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard. I didn't even know the words, but it woke me up. I started asking questions I wasn't supposed to ask. That's when I knew, if a song could do that to me in seconds, imagine what it could do to others if they heard it in full." Jacob nodded slowly. He knew exactly what she meant. Before he could say more, the ship's sensors chirped soft at first, then more insistent. Kella's hands flew over the controls. "What is it?" he asked. "We're being followed." Jacob frowned. "Impossible. This corridor should be untraceable." "Unless," Kayla said grimly, "someone placed a tracker on you before you came to me." Jacob's gut tightened. "The patrol. When they first passed over me, maybe the sensors gave a sharper tone. and a new blip appeared on the display, small, but closing fast. Kayla cursed under her breath in her own language. It's a dart ship, fast, light, armed enough to cripple us. If they catch us in here, they'll drag us out into open space for pickup. Jacob's mind raced. We can't outrun them, not in here. But she paused, her eyes narrowing. There is one option. Dangerous. Very dangerous. He gave her a dry look. Everything about this has been dangerous since I met you. She tapped a section of the display. There's a fracture point ahead. We could exit the corridor, early drop into normal space. But we'll be in the burn belt. Jacob knew. The name? A debris field the size of a small planet. Formed from the shattered remains of dozens of ships, Terran and alien, after a massive battle decades ago. Flying through it was suicide unless you knew the paths. You know the paths? He asked. Her lips curved slightly. I made some of them. Jacob grinned faintly. Then let's take the scenic route. Kayla didn't waste time. She angled the ship toward the fracture point. The dart ship was still closing in, its engines flaring like a hunter's eyes. The moment they hit the fracture, the corridor shattered around them, the streaks of light twisting violently before snapping into pinpricks. Suddenly, they were surrounded by a glowing, chaotic field of spinning metal, broken hulls, and the drifting skeletons of warships. The dart ship followed them in, weaving through the debris with unnerving skill. Kayla gripped the controls, guiding them through narrow gaps. Chunks of twisted armor and shattered engine cores floated past so close. Jacob could have reached out and touched them. The dart ship fired, a burst of energy scorching past their wing. Jacob's instincts kicked in. Collicut left, between those two freighter husks. She didn't question him. The ship tilted sharply, sliding through a gap so narrow Jacob's shoulder nearly brushed the wall. The dart ship tried to follow, but clipped its wing on a protruding beam, spinning wildly for a moment before regaining control. That bought us time, Kayla said, her voice tight. Jacob spotted something ahead, a massive wreck, split in half, with a dark hollow in its center. There inside that cruiser's belly. Kill the lights. Kayla's fingers danced across the controls. The ship drifted silently into the wreck, settling in the shadow of a broken reactor core. Outside, the dart ship slowed, scanning the area. They held their breath. Minutes passed. The dart ship made another slow pass, then accelerated away, disappearing into the debris field. Jacob exhaled. Looks like they lost us. Kayla didn't move. She was staring at the cassette player still sitting on the console beside her. We can't keep running forever. They've marked you. They'll keep coming. Then we don't just run, Jacob said. We make them afraid to follow. Her eyes narrowed. And how do you propose we do that? He tapped the cassette. This music here, people banned it because it spreads ideas they can't control. What if we didn't just play it for you? What if we broadcast it? Kayla stared at him in silence. To who? To anyone who can hear it, Jacob said. Every ship, every station, every backwater outpost between here and your world. We make sure the first time your leaders hear this music is when it's already too late to stop it. For the first time since they met, Kayla looked unsure. If we do this, they'll see it as an attack. They might declare war again. Jacob leaned forward. Maybe. But wars start because people are afraid of losing control. If enough people hear this music, your leaders won't have control to lose. Kayla glanced down at the cassette, her fingers brushing the edges as if feeling its weight. Slowly, she nodded. Then we'll need a relay. A big one, and I know where to find one. Jacob smiled. Lead the way. She started the engines again, and the wreck around them fell away into the burn belt once more. Somewhere ahead, Hidden in the chaos was the next step in turning one old tape into a spark that could set an entire world alight. Neither of them noticed the tiny, black sphere drifting in their wake, silent, unblinking, and transmitting their every move. The burn belt thinned after several hours of weaving through broken ships and drifting wreckage. Jacob had lost track of how many times they'd scraped past jagged metal, or how often Kella's quick reflexes had saved them from being smashed by a tumbling engine core. When the field finally began to clear, Kayla slowed the ship and brought up a navigational map. The display showed a faint flickering marker deep in the shadow of a small, dead moon. "That's it," she said. "The relay station." Jacob leaned forward. "Doesn't look like much. It's not supposed to. It was built before our last war as a neutral hub between our peoples. When the fighting started, it was abandoned. The location was erased from all official charts." He crossed his arms. "Let me guess your leaders didn't erase it from their secret maps." She gave a small, sharp smile. "Of course not. But most don't bother with it now. It's old, decaying, and unguarded. Which is why it's perfect for us." They dropped out of the burn belt and into the moon's shadow. The relay came into view, an enormous spire of metal and glass, its surface pitted and scarred by decades of neglect. Broken antennae jutted at odd angles, and faint lights still pulsed near its base, like the heartbeat of something half alive. Kayla guided the ship toward a docking collar on the relay's underside. The magnetic clamps engaged with a metallic thud. "Keep your guard up," she said, unstrapping. "If the station's systems still work, so might its defenses." Jacob followed her into the airlock, his boots echoing in the narrow metal corridor. The air inside was stale and cold, with a faint tinge of old lubricants. Lights flickered along the walls as they moved deeper. They reached the main control chamber, a wide circular room with a domed ceiling. Holographic projectors stood dormant, their lenses coated in dust. In the center, a console blinked faintly, waiting. Kayla knelt beside it, brushing away debris. "Still has power. That's a good sign." Jacob looked around uneasily, and no sign of anyone else. She powered up the console. The relay systems hummed to life, filling the chamber with a low vibration. Screens lit up, displaying frequency ranges, signal routes, and long-forgotten encryption keys. "This will work," Kayla said, her voice low but certain. "We can patch your cassette into the system, broadcast it across multiple civilian channels. My people won't be able to block all of them." Jacob pulled the cassette from his jacket pocket. "Then let's make history." She took it, her fingers careful, and slid it into a slot on the modified player she'd carried aboard her ship. Wires ran from the player to the relay console. A faint hiss filled the chamber as the first track began to play through the relay speakers. Jacob felt a strange tightness in his chest. "Once we send it, we can't pull it back," Kayla said quietly. "Then send it," Jacob replied. She entered the final command, and the relay's ancient transmitters roared to life. The walls shuddered slightly as powerful bursts of signal were hurled into space, carrying the music outward in every direction. Jacob imagined ships in distant ports, miners in deep belt colonies, freighters on long hauls, all suddenly hearing Earth's raw, unfiltered music. He imagined Kella's people, hearing the same words he had grown up with, feeling the same fire. But before the first song finished, the console flashed red. Kella's expression darkened. "We've been detected." Jacob's eyes narrowed. "By who?" "Multiple signatures inbound. Not patrol craft hunters. They must have been listening for any illegal transmissions." "How soon?" "Minutes." Jacob stepped toward the console. "Can we finish the broadcast?" "Maybe, but we won't get out if we stay here." He thought for a moment. "Split it. Send half now, half when we're moving." That way, they can't stop at all. She hesitated, then nodded and entered the new sequence. The console continued to pulse, sending the first half of the cassettes. Tracks into the void, the relay shuddered again, but this time, not from its own transmitters. The station's old hull vibrated with the distant thump of something docking forcefully. Jacob drew a deep breath. "We've got company." The sound of metal boots echoed from the corridor they'd entered through. Kella's eyes hardened. "They'll be armed," she said, "and they won't ask questions." Jacob scanned the room quickly, spotting a maintenance hatch in the floor. "Down there, where does it go?" "Service tunnels. Narrow, but they connect to the other side of the station." Jacob crouched, pried the hatch open, and gestured for her to go first. She slid into the darkness without hesitation, the cassette player still slung over her shoulder. He followed, pulling the hatch shut just as the control chamber doors burst open through the narrow gaps in the hatch. Jacob glimpsed armored figures entering, tall, insect-like aliens with segmented helmets and weapons that crackled with blue energy. They swept the room quickly. Then one of them hissed in a language Jacob didn't understand. The sound of heavy boots moved toward the hatch, but then stopped. A voice barked an order, and the footsteps retreated. In the tunnel, Kayla whispered, "They're securing the exits. We'll have to move fast." They crawled through the cramped passage, the hum of the relay still faintly audible above them. The music was still going out, but for how much longer? Jacob didn't know. When they reached another access point, Kayla eased it open and peeked through. The corridor beyond was empty, lit only by flickering strips of light. "This way," she whispered. They moved quickly, following the curved hallway toward the docking level. But as they rounded a corner, a shadow detached itself from the wall. A hunter stood there, weapon raised, visor reflecting the dim light. Jacob froze. The alien tilted its head slightly. Then, in halting Terran speech, it said, "Give." "The." Song Keela's hand moved toward her weapon, but Jacob stepped forward slowly. "Why, so your leaders can destroy it." The hunter was silent for a moment. Then it said something neither of them expected. "No, so I can hear. The rest?" The hunter's visor hid its eyes, but Jacob could feel the weight of its stare. The alien's segmented armor gleamed faintly in the dim light. Each plate etched with marks Jacob didn't recognize, battle scars, maybe, or something more personal. Kayla didn't lower her weapon. "If you're lying, you die where you stand," she said coldly. The hunter tilted its head again, and in its halting Terran, repeated, "Want to hear." Jacob stepped between them, holding up a hand to Kayla. "Let him talk." She hesitated, then lowered her aim slightly, though her grip stayed firm. "Explain," she demanded. The hunter shifted its weight, as if uncomfortable with the words it was about to say. "I was on border patrol. Picked up, forbidden signal. Music, old Earth voice. It moved something inside. Could not turn it off." Jacob's heart thudded. "You heard our broadcast." "Yes," the hunter said. "And I followed. Not to capture, to know more." Kella's expression was unreadable. "That's true. Then you're committing treason, just by speaking to us." The hunter gave a small, strange noise that might have been a laugh. "Treason is only word for fear. I have heard truth. I cannot unhear it." For a moment, the narrow corridor felt even smaller, charged with something Jacob couldn't name. This was the kind of thing music could do. He'd seen it on Earth, but never imagined it could cross species like this. "Then help us," Jacob said. "We need to finish the broadcast." The hunter glanced down the hallway, as if listening for other boots. More hunters coming. They will not feel as I do. You must leave now. Kella's voice was sharp. "We can't leave until..." The second half of the songs are sent. The alien's visor turned toward her. Then I will buy you time. Jacob frowned. That's suicide. Maybe, the hunter said simply, but better to die with music in my head than live without it. Before either of them could answer, the hunter turned and strode down the hall toward the sound of approaching steps. A moment later, the sharp crack of energy fire rang through the station, followed by shouts in the hunter's language. Kayla didn't waste the opportunity. Docking levels this way, she said, breaking into a run. Jacob followed, the echo of the gunfire still ringing in his ears. Whoever that hunter was, he'd just chosen Saeedin, not the one expected. They reached the docking bay, only to find two more armored hunters guarding the entrance to Kella's ship. One of them spotted them immediately and raised its weapon. Jacob dove behind a support column as blue energy scorched the wall where he'd been standing. Kayla fired back, her shots precise, forcing the guards to scatter. We can't hold them off forever, Chica shouted. Then don't, Kayla yelled back, sprinting toward the nearest control panel. She slammed her palm against it, triggering the bay's emergency bulkhead release. A deep clang echoed through the chamber as a heavy blast door began to descend between them and the hunters. One alien tried to rush through, but Jacob grabbed a loose cable from the wall and whipped it across the hunter's legs, sending it sprawling back. The blast door sealed shut with a final echoing thud. That'll slow them, Kayla said. Catching her breath, they ran up the ramp into her ship, the hatch sealing behind them. Engines? She barked, sliding into the pilot's chair. Jacob dropped into the co-pilot seat, watching the relay status feed on the side display. Signals still going out. Second half's almost there. The ship lifted from the docking clamps, turning sharply away from the moon. Jacob risked a glance at the display. Kayla, look at this. She glanced over, and her eyes widened. The signal feed showed dozens of active receivers, not just a few stray ships, not just distant colonies. Entire clusters of stations and cities were locked onto the broadcast. They're rebroadcasting it, she said in awe. Others are sending it further. Jacob grinned. It's already out of their hands. Then a proximity alarm blared, and the smile vanished. Multiple hunter ships were closing in fast, forming a net around the relay and their escape vector. Kayla's voice was calm, but her hands moved fast over the controls. They'll try to disable us, then board. Options. Jacob asked. Run, she said, and hope the music runs faster. The ship shot forward, engines burning bright. The hunters gave chase, their weapons lighting up the void. Kayla weaved between debris and old satellites, every jolt and lurch pressing Jacob harder into his seat. A shot clipped their aft shields, sending a shiver through the hull. They're gaining, Jacob warned. Kayla's eyes narrowed. Not for long. She cut the main thrusters, letting the ship drift. The hunters adjusted to match speed, just as she hit a different control. A burst of bright flares exploded from their rear. Blinding. The hunter's sensors, Jacob laughed. Old Navy trick. Nice. They shot forward again, leaving the disoriented pursuers behind. But Jacob's smile faded as he glanced at the feed one last time. Kayla. There's a transmission coming from the relay. She frowned. From who? He tapped the screen, opening the audio. A voice came through clear, strong, and speaking in Kayla's language. He didn't know the words, but he didn't have to. The tone was unmistakable. What is it? He asked. Kayla's face was pale. It's my people's high command. They're calling the music an act of war. And they've put a bounty on us both. The words act of war seemed to hang in the air long after Kayla cut the transmission. The hum of the ship's engines felt louder now, like the thudding of blood in Jacob's ears. He leaned forward in his seat. How bad is this bounty? Kellis. Hands tightened on the controls. High Command doesn't post rewards lightly. They've offered enough to buy a fleet. Every mercenary, every smuggler, every drifter with a gun will be after us. Jacob exhaled slowly. So, basically, we've just put a target the size of a moon on our backs. She glanced at him. Not just our backs. Anyone who helps us will be hunted too. Jacob thought of the lone hunter who'd bought them time back at the station. Then some of them have already chosen their side. Keela's gaze shifted. Back to the stars. Choosing is one thing. Surviving is another. The proximity alarm blared again. Jacob checked the sensors. 3 ships incoming. Not Hunter's civilian craft, but they're moving fast. Mercenaries? Kayla said. Flatly, she threw the ship into a dive, cutting between 2 drifting cargo hulks. The mercenary ships followed, firing low-powered shots meant to disable, not destroy. Jacob's fingers flew over the co-pilot's controls, bringing up countermeasures. If they just want to disable us, that means they want us alive. That makes them more dangerous, Kayla replied. The hunters would kill quickly. Mercenaries drag you back breathing. A flash of light filled the cockpit as one of the mercenaries scored a glancing hit on their starboard. Shields at 60%, Jacob reported. Kella's jaw tightened. We can't keep trading shots. We need to disappear. She veered toward a cluster of old industrial platforms, their skeleton-like frames spinning slowly in the void. Rusted metal beams jutted in every direction, forming a labyrinth of shadow and hard cover. Jacob's pulse quickened. You know this place. No, she said. But if I were a mercenary, I'd hate chasing anyone in here. The ship plunged into the maze of metal. Beams and shattered panels flashed past the cockpit, sometimes missing by only meters. The mercenaries followed, their heavier ships scraping against the narrow passages. Jacob spotted an opening to the left, cut in their tight turn. Kayla banked sharply, skimming the edge of a spinning girder. One mercenary tried to follow and clipped its wing, spiraling out of control before exploding against a beam. That's one down, Jacob said. The other 2 hung back, firing cautiously into the maze. Kella's eyes scanned the shadows. They're waiting for us to come out the other side. We won't give them the chance. She cut the engines entirely, letting the ship drift silently into the shadow of a massive panel. The sudden stillness was jarring. Jacob lowered his voice. Instinctively, they'll scan for heat signatures. Kayla reached for a control and killed the heat output, plunging the cockpit into cold silence. The only light came from the faint glow of the instruments. They waited. Seconds stretched. In 2 minutes. The mercenaries passed close by once, their searchlights cutting through the dark. Jacob held his breath until they moved on. When the radar finally showed them leaving, Kayla powered the engines back up, the sudden hum feeling almost too loud. They'll be back, Jacob said. Then we need somewhere they can't follow, Kayla replied. He frowned. And where's that? She looked at him with a hint of a smile. Home. Jacob stared at her. You mean your home? The one whose leaders just put a bounty on us. Her smile didn't fade. Yes, if we want this music to matter, it has, to reach the heart of the empire. And that means I take you to the capital. Jacob leaned back, shaking his head. That's suicide, maybe, she said. But it's the only way to make sure the songs can't be erased. Before he could argue further, the console lit up with an incoming signal nod from High Command, not from mercenaries. It was an open broadcast. No encryption. Jacob tapped it, and a voice filled the cockpit. It was human, to anyone hearing. This is Captain Elias Ford. Freighter Rising Dawn. We picked up a strange transmission earlier today. Music, not military codes. Real music. We've rebroadcast it to every contact we have. And we're not the only ones. The signal is everywhere. Traders, miners, even patrol crews are passing it along. To whoever sent it, don't stop. Jacob felt something in his chest tighten. He glanced at Kayla, and for once, she didn't try to hide the way her eyes brightened. "That's it," Jacob said softly. "That's the start." The journey to Kayla's homeworld took them through 3 unmarked routes, 2 smuggler jump points, and a narrow pass between twin suns that burned so bright Jacob had to look away from the cockpit windows. Every step closer tightened the noose dot. The bounty had worked exactly as High Command intended. Kayla's com scans showed hundreds of channels buzzing with their names, their ship description, and the reward. Mercenaries prowled every major port. Patrol fleets swept the space lanes, but the music had worked too. Jacob could hear it in the background of almost every intercepted signal, snippets of Earth songs being played, sung or even whistled by voices both human and alien. Sometimes it was the exact track from the cassette. Sometimes it was a rough recreation, played on strange alien instruments. It was spreading faster than either of them imagined. "Once we land, we'll have minutes before they lock down the area," Kayla said, eyes fixed on the growing planet ahead. It glowed silver blue against the black, its cloud systems forming elegant spirals. "And in those minutes?" Jacob asked. "We reached the central broadcast tower. The capital signal. Relays link to every system in the Empire. If we plug the cassette in there, the full album will go everywhere. They won't be able to erase it without shutting down their entire com network." Jacob smirked. "And something tells me they won't risk that." "They won't," Kayla agreed. "Too much of their control depends on those channels." The ship pierced the atmosphere, buffeted by high winds. Kayla set them down on the outskirts of the capital, near the base of a colossal tower that stretched so high it vanished. Into the clouds they ran. The streets were smooth and gleaming, lined with towering structures of glassy metal. Alien civilians stared as they passed Kayla's silver-blue glow, marking her as one of their own. Jacob's presence drawing confused, wary looks by the time they reached the tower's entrance. A deep alarm was sounding across the city. "They know we're here," Jacob said. Kayla swiped her ident card across the entrance panel. It blinked red. "Locked down already." Jacob scanned the base of the door, then pulled an old Navy trick. He slammed his palm against the maintenance override panel and yanked the cover free. "Give me the cassette player's cable." Kayla handed it over without question, plugged it into the exposed control port, and bypassed the security loop. The door slid open with a hiss. Inside, the tower was a cathedral of technology walls lined with endless screens, glowing cables running like veins toward the central core. At the top of a long ramp stood the main broadcast console. They sprinted. Up. Jacob reached the console first, pulling the cassette from his jacket. "Let's end this." Kayla's hand caught his. "No, we end this." Together, they slid the tape into the console's slot. The speakers filled with that warm, imperfect hiss. Then the first chords rang out. The room itself seemed to vibrate. As the sound poured into the broadcast network, racing outward through every channel in the Empire, Kayla closed her eyes, letting the lyrics wash over her. Jacob kept his eyes open and saw the guards arrive. A squad of armored enforcers stormed the ramp, weapons raised. Their leader barked an order. Jacob stepped forward, blocking their path. "If you shoot me, you destroy the console." They hesitated. Kayla opened her eyes and raised her voice, not in a shout, but in the steady, clear tone of someone who no longer feared. "This is not an attack," she said, speaking in her own language. "It is a gift. We were taught that feelings make us weak, but feelings make us alive. This music is ours now. You cannot stop it." The leader's visor shifted toward her. then toward the speakers. Behind him, one of the enforcers moved his weapon aside just slightly, and Jacob saw the truth in that gesture. They'd heard the songs, too. The leader gave a sharp gesture, and the squad stepped back. Kayla turned to Jacob, breathless. "It's done." They backed away from the console as the last track played. Somewhere outside, the alarms stopped. The city's great tower stood silent, except for the music pouring into the skies by the time they reached the streets again. Crowds were gathering, aliens of every age and color, standing still as the songs played through the public speakers. Some smiled, some cried. Some simply closed their eyes and listened. Kayla looked at Jacob, her voice low. "They can still punish us. We might have to run forever." Jacob smiled faintly. "Maybe, but they'll be running too, trying to catch something they can't see or kill." They walked through the listening crowd, no one stopping them. Somewhere above, the final notes faded into silence, and then, from across the street, someone began to hum the melody. Another voice joined in. Then another. Kellis' eyes glowed gold. "It's already begun." Jacob nodded, "and it won't stop." As they reached the edge of the city, Kayla took his hand, not in fear, but in quiet triumph. Together, they disappeared into the unknown, leaving behind a world that would never sound the same again.